Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Are you guys okay? I'm looking for liquor up here. He grabbed it. Adonai Mamadam Vatidalechu Ben Enosh V'chashvechu Adam le'avel dama Yamav Kitzelo Ver Babokei Atzitz V'chalav La'erev L'moleh v'yavish Tashev Enosh Adaka Vatomer Shuvu v'nei Adam. We gather today with all our hearts, minds, and souls to remember Stan, Dr. Abrams, Pop-Pop, Grandpop, Stash. We gather with many mixed emotions, certainly with the emotion of knowing that he is no longer with us in this life, but certainly with the knowledge that he is on his way. In all Godspeed to his eternal resting place, to be with those who have gone before him in a reunification of love. And also with the knowledge that, as is tradition in Judaism, someone never really dies. Their lives, their likes, their strengths, their characteristics are passed down lidor vador, from generation to generation. And they are passed down in the names of boys and girls that are not even born yet. But I can certainly foresee in your homes, in the years to come, many little Stans running around, or many little, whatever the female name of Stan is. And they will be taught. And they will be taught that they are named after someone so very special that we gather here today. And they will be taught the knowledge of his long life, his loved life. Who among us here has not passed through our own trials and bereavements? Some of us bear fresh wounds in our own hearts, and therefore feel more keenly the kinship of sorrow with those who love and will always love Stan the most. Others of us whose mourning is more remote, we still recall when a silent hug or a kiss or a word brought comfort to our sorrowing hearts. All things pass, all that lives must die, all that we prize is but lent to us. We are travelers on the same road that leads to the same end. So as King David wrote in the 23rd Psalm, over 3,000 years ago, those words are as true today as they were 3,000 years ago, that God will walk us through the valley of the shadow of death. And one day, when you wake up, what will be left in your hearts are simply the joy-filled and the happy memories of Stash. And those will be the memories that will be in your life from this day forth. And you will know that, as King David wrote, that God walked you through the valley of sadness into the valley of remembrance of Pop-Pop, of Grandpop. As we all say, Amen. If you know the traditional words of the 23rd Psalm, we say them together with all our hearts. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He renews my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord. We begin many, many words of love, not only today, but certainly for many years to come. We begin those words with Stephen.
Thank you, Kenner, and to all of our friends and family. We thank you for being here. Some who are watching on live stream, and we thank you for that as well. I think most of you know I am Stan's eldest child, the first of his beloved children, stepchildren, grandchildren gathered here today, all of whom came at different times during his life, and all with different perspectives and stories, and you'll hear some of those from the following speakers. But not only did he have me first, I have the distinction of having him first to myself. So I did have some last-minute candidates file against me later on, but I had the benefit of Stan for those early years by myself. And those were happy childhood memories, walking me to kindergarten, clutching him as he took me out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, or at least what I thought at the time was the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, taking me to my first Phillies game, track meets, even tossing a baseball with him. Hard to imagine, but true. Or let me put the passage of time in a different perspective. I knew my dad when all he had was just one collection. One stamp collection. It's a true story. Then when I was in my teens, he came by his Philadelphia, I'm going to spend a little time on collections, and as a lot of the speakers will, I'm sure. He came by his Philadelphia Centennial paper collection, very excited about that. And then the other paper collections, and then the multitude of other collections. I think we all lost track when he assembled his toothpick collection. So upwards of 70 collections, I am told. One collection story, it's actually a memorabilia story that he loved to tell, which is that when he was 9 years old, it was the first year that comic books were published. No one had ever seen, as hard as to believe, a comic book until that year, 1938. And he saw one, he was fascinated by it. I mean, especially the one he found, which was with this fellow who on the cover with a cape, and he was jumping over tall buildings and rescuing people and fighting crime. So he bought the comic book. He read it for a while, and then he placed it on a table at home, and the next day it was gone. He asked his mother, Sadie, for those of you who knew my grandmother, where the comic book was, and she said, I don't know, you were done with it. I tossed it out. I didn't know what it was. So, of course, the punchline of the story is that a Superman First Edition #1 comic last April sold for $6 million at auction. And he would have kept it in mint condition, of course, all these years. So my dad died peacefully at home, surrounded by his family and the collections that he loved. And although he had all those collections, Stanley Abrams himself was one of a kind. So whether you knew him, Ken, or you mentioned some of the names, and I have some of them. You might have missed a few. So Stan the man you mentioned, or no, Stan the man you did not. Stosh, many people call him Dad, Grandpa. Dr. A, a lot of his patients called him Dr. A, or however you know him. He was a unique individual. 96 years old and a full head of hair. Let's start with that because I'm very excited about that. Very family-oriented, a detached and sometimes even reserved demeanor, but could be very assertive. And everyone liked him. Also, as the eldest son himself, Stanley Abrams could lay claim as the titular head of the family. I've always said that the head of this family, who held it all together, the name began with an S, 7 letters, and ended in L-E-Y. And no, it was not Stanley, it was Shirley. and Cheryl, seriously, you know, my father's quality of life, not just in his last years, but throughout your many years of marriage, was incredible up to the very end because of your devotion to him. And also, by the way, Laura, Cheryl's rock. Dad was a high school sprinter. He ran the 100-yard dash as a track star at Central. And one of his favorite photos that he had hanging on the wall that I saw many, many times at 3rd Street showed him winning a race with his hands up at the tape, but he had not yet crossed the finish line. He won the race, but by putting his hands up just before the end of the race, it actually took time off of his finish, and he just missed out on setting a school record. When he showed me that picture, he always told me that he learned a lesson the hard way, which was always run the race till the end. Don't declare victory until you've crossed the finish line. Well, Dad, you have finished the race. You can now declare victory. You have raised your hands in the air until the end, and you did not declare victory until you crossed the finish line. And so, as we lay my dad to rest today, I conclude with a poem that reflects on the lesson of another type of dash, the dash between the date of birth and the date of death on a headstone. And let's all of us ponder the meaning of a life lived and a legacy left behind. This is a poem, The Dash by Linda Ellis. I read of a man who stood to speak at the funeral of a friend. He referred to the dates on the tombstone from the beginning to the end. He noted that first came the date of birth and spoke the ending date with tears. But he said what mattered most of all was that dash between the years.
We call up with love, Elise.
Hi, I'm the youngest daughter, and my piece of writing touches on collections too. How could it not? So here's a little tribute to my dad. I'm going to add a name too, Slay, right? Stanley Leonard Abrams, Slay. We passed an antique store. I was his passenger like always. Maybe we rode in an Oldsmobile Buick or a Cadillac Seville, or maybe that weird little outlier, his navy blue Chevy Chevette. It was much harder to pretend I was an astronaut in a tin can hatchback. He pointed out the word collectibles on the sign, said they'd spelled it wrong. Should be an I, not an A. I took it in, never forgot it. A small lesson, but symbolic of who my dad was, not only a seasoned collector, but a master of details. Over my 55 years, I watched and witnessed my dad's many collections. I remember him writing a list of them in weepy blue ballpoint on a pad of white paper the size of a prescription pad. Over 100, babe, he said proudly. He wrote in tiny block letters, much neater than what we typically expect from doctors. He collected coins, stamps, antique ads, Mickey Mouse figures, postcards, Lincoln and Truman memorabilia. Truman was his favorite president. So many more, too numerous to list. He kept them all meticulously organized in stacks and rows and grids until they needed their own rooms. When I got older, I fantasized an art installation, all of his collections laid out like an enormous patchwork quilt in a pristine white gallery space, in memoriam. When I was little, he took me to the International House of Pancakes. They had a promotion then, collectible magnets of all the football teams. First, you got your magnet board, one side red, the other blue, AFC and NFC. Each time you returned, you received a football helmet to fill in the grid. It was my first real collection, just like Dad. If I were more careful, like he was, I'd still have it now, but it's long gone. Dad and I collected darker things too, grievances. Ours was a complicated relationship, dotted with resentments and hurt feelings, upsets and grudges. In tandem, we packed our grievances into little cardboard boxes, lined them up on wooden bookshelves, tucked them into glassine envelopes. Our dark collections separated us for spans of time, but they also united us. We were far more alike than different. Over time, slowly at first, and then maybe all at once, we offloaded our tribulations. They grew too heavy a burden, monotonous and exhausting, so we lightened our loads, keeping only what made us happy. Eventually, we saw each other through clear eyes. We traded our darkness for time spent together. It wasn't enough. It never is. I squandered so much. But the takeaway is infinite and instant, like the flash of delight in his eyes when I'd arrive with my family for a bite. I won't lose that collectible with an eye. Rest easy, Dad. I love you, babe.
We've heard so many names that Stan was called. In this next poem, when we say the words, we will remember, please say the name that you called him personally in this life, and you will have the honor of calling him when you have the privilege and the blessing of thinking of him or dreaming of him. Say that name out loud, the name that he was known to you as. In your life, in the rising of the sun and at its going down, we will remember. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we will remember. In the opening of the buzz and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember. When we are lost and sick at heart, we will remember. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember. So long as we live, he too will live, for he is now a part of us, as we will always remember. We call up with love, Debbie.
Good morning. My friend Laura calls me the crier, so I'm going to try to do the best I can up here. Even though I haven't known Stan for as long as many of you have, I truly grew to love him in the short time that I did. I met Stan and Cheryl through his daughter Laura, my dear friend, and they immediately made me feel like family. Stan and I spent many, many hours organizing, categorizing, and taking inventory of those numerous collections. These times were very special to me because as we were going through everything, he would reminisce and tell me wonderful stories about his childhood, becoming a doctor, his adventures and trips with Cheryl, and of course about his children and grandchildren. He literally took me on a journey through his life. Stan and I always shared our love of sports, and we would spend a lot of time discussing the Phillies and the Eagles, the good games and the bad ones. And he would always say, if I was the coach of that team, and then he would proceed to tell me exactly what he would do. Thank you to all of Stan's family for giving me the opportunity to be a part of his life and all of your lives. Stan, you will always be my special buddy. I love you, and I will miss you dearly. Thank you.
Laura.
Thank you all for coming. My dear Stan, as I sit here and I write this, I can't believe how our relationship has grown over the past 40 years. When I first met you, I was a mere 21 years old, and I thought of you as my mother's new husband. Definitely a difficult and confusing time in my life. Our new combined family took a while to get used to, but as the years passed and I got older and more mature, it became easier. You always took an interest in my life, no matter if it was my career or helping me celebrate milestones such as weddings, birthdays, and the birth of my 2 daughters, who would also become your granddaughters. When you and Mom moved to Cherry Hill, that's when I noticed our relationship changing, and we began to get much closer. Fast forward to 2018, when you were 90. Our relationship changed yet again. You were no longer my mother's husband. You were now my dad, and I was your daughter. We now always tell each other, I love you. We have spent a lot of time together these past 6 years, as I have helped to care for you, take you to doctor's appointments, visit you during hospital stays, talk about the Phillies and the Eagles. This past year has been your hardest, with many trips to the hospital and lots of pain, but you willed yourself to make it to Rachel's graduation. My greatest joy was having you there to see your granddaughter follow in your footsteps and become a doctor. It's finally time to rest and be at peace. I will love and miss you forever. Your daughter, Laura.
If you are able to, we rise for the prayer of our departed, the El Malay Rachamim. אמרי רחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, עם קידושים מתרים גזרה רקיע מזהירים את נשמת שמואל לייב בן יוסף ושרה, שלח לי עולמו ברחמים, יסירכו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרה החיים את נשמתו. אדוני נחלתו וינוח בשלום על משכבו ונו more. Amen. And once again, in the space provided, please say the name. That Stan, if you had the honor of knowing him, will forever be known to you as personally. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence too, who has entered eternity, O God of mercy. Let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bonds of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us all say, Amen. You may be seated.